It's time now for County-Wide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Brad Miller as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives here in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's County-Wide.
Good day once again, and welcome to the program. Brad Miller with you, and we're happy to welcome into studio a guest that we've had on our show a number of times, and our radio listeners, our news listeners will be familiar with the voice of Sgt Brandon Bonney with the Prescott Valley Police Department. And good day to you once again.
Thank you for having me.
Always good to have you visit. You always bring us some of our more interesting topics.
I try to.
We talk to law enforcement, fire officials, emergency service folks quite a bit, and all of those programs are good, but you come up with some different angles on things. And a lot of it does come from stories that we've had in the news. Just not terribly long ago, we had a youngster kind of get himself into a spot of trouble with what amounted to a toy gun or a threat. A perceived threat. And that's kind of what happens these days, sometimes when there's a misunderstanding, especially around a school, as the situation was. It gets people very, very excited, and it should. As we record this show, we had another shooting in another state just yesterday that may have been accidental or something far worse at a school. And so this is going to be something we're going to live with forever. One of the issues, though, that I know that you're concerned, you being meaning police, are toy guns.
Absolutely.
And again, as we tape our show here, we're just coming into the Halloween weekend. There will be little mobsters and bandits and things like that, and sometimes we want to get them fully accessorized with those toy weapons. And Brandon's going to talk a little bit about that today, but also about some of the issues involving weapons around schools. Had a fellow say something along the line of, he has a firearm, he's licensed and all legal, all fine and good, but he keeps the weapon, and now we're talking about a real weapon, right, in the console of his vehicle, and it's still there when he drops his young granddaughter off at her school. And I thought, is that legal or no? And we're going to have you answer that question during our show and some other things. So the gist of the show today is we're going to kind of talk about toy weapons, but also how that kind of extrapolates into issues at schools, especially, and we'll kind of go from there. One of the things that you did today that I find extremely interesting as we chatted on the phone was you said, I'm going to bring some toy guns or airsoft guns that are not quote-unquote real, and see if we can kind of pick them out. And I can tell you right now, except for the one there, I don't know that I'd be able to pick any of those as not the real thing.
Absolutely, and that's what's really scary. I mean, this one here, this is a Colt Defender, basically a faux weapon, and this looks very, very realistic. I mean, even to a law enforcement professional, it's got the safeties, the same basic everything that you would see in mechanisms that you would see on a real gun, right down to even a serial number. Yeah. And this is an airsoft or a pellet gun. Yeah. This thing in the dark would be extremely dangerous to be presenting in any way other than for recreational purposes. Right. And even the weight of this, and be careful because it's difficult to clear these, if you can feel the weight of that feels the weight of a real gun. Yeah. There's nothing about that screams that that's a toy. And much like this one, this is plastic, but this is a very, very realistic looking weapon. And we're seeing more and more realism with the airsofts. We talked just prior to taping about the toys versus airsoft versus pellets and real firearms. And anymore, the airsoft weapons are what most people would use as a toy weapon. And there are kids that will run around and shoot at each other with the airsoft because they're a plastic BB, still dangerous and shouldn't be shot at somebody, specifically the head or eyes. But
more likely an eye threat than a break the skin, really.
Absolutely. And in fact, even law enforcement uses airsoft for training because it's cheaper than some munitions. Sure. But again, we use them because it's a real life type scenario. Now, you take a gun like this and you run around playing airsoft guns, and you end up shooting at each other in an area outside your house, or somebody sees this. Perception is the key. Right. A citizen carrying a gun, a law enforcement officer, especially in a dim light, seeing something like this pointed at them, they're not really going to be able to take that chance to hope that it is an airsoft gun. Right. And if they see him pointing it at a third party, where the two people playing might know that it's a toy gun or an airsoft, they might be shot by a third party who perceives an immediate threat.
How can you know? You can't.
You can't.
There's been horrible tragedies along that line. I don't know that we've had any in our community. We'll knock on wood. But didn't that kind of lead to a lot of the toy guns, the plastic toy guns being changed into? My kids they're young yet and have toy weapons. They're very brightly colored, orange and greens and whites and that kind of thing. And it's extremely obvious that they're.
Well, and even then, a lot of them just come like this one here, which is a very realistic. It even has a a faux, very expensive sight, which I'd like to have for my gun. You can see this is partially painted black, but it is orange. But if this, again, if you're looking at the gun itself in a high-stress situation, you're not going to focus on just the orange tip of this. And if this were pointed at you, which I'm not going to do, you'd be looking at a very, very small piece of the barrel. And again, unless you're very fortunate to see that, you wouldn't be able to make that choice. But they make other guns, competition guns in pink, blue, purple,
that's changing.
Clear.
Are toy gun makers required to paint them or color them or shape them or do anything different? When I was a kid, man, it was all about, oh, that looks real.
Right.
And, that looks real.
And I think that's what they're going for. And again, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that I'm not 100% sure. I do know that most of them are equipped with safety features, so that they can be distinguished somewhat easily. Some are obvious. That they're toy guns. But even a gun like this, I've seen some that are this realistic, where what they'll do is they'll make this portion of the gun clear. And again, if it's a low light situation or if this is pointed at you, you're not going to be able to see that at 20, 30, 40 paces away to know whether or not it is that it's a fake gun. Hopefully, if it is, there's enough time, there's enough visibility to be able to determine that in fact is a fake gun. But you just, it's a split-second decision that's going to be made by an officer or third party, and it's a tragedy that doesn't need to happen. And these airsoft, I mean, this is the way you see them in the stores. And again, I'm not knocking the companies, because that's part of the allure, is that it looks like a realistic weapon. But there's nothing, if I put the real version of this side by side, you likely wouldn't be able to tell without picking them up.
I'm not enough of a gun guy. I wouldn't know. I mean, I asked you as you were setting these out, which of these are the real thing, and you said, well, none of them are. I wouldn't have known, and I'd guess a very good many people, outside gun owners, would know. We've talked about the police threat and low light issues, and heaven forbid an officer or several are looking for a suspect for some kind of a crime, and kids wander into the scene with these. I mean, you can imagine what can happen. It seems to me one of the bigger threats, and here in Arizona, self-protection. A lot of people carry weapons, more and more and more. It seems like with some of the changes in the laws. It seems to me that the threat for an accidental shooting by a civilian trying to do good, or not having even the police training, wanders into that situation, that it ratchets up the danger level even more.
Absolutely.
An officer's trained, to look for certain things beyond just the weapon, whereas a civilian might think, hey, man, that guy's got a gun. I can act. And
And it's going to be a life-changing end for all of them, because if somebody fires because they perceive somebody is in danger and they don't see the gun firing, plastic BBs, then they're going to have to live with that their whole life as well. And it's an extremely dangerous situation. We do occasionally have to go and talk with kids who are running through the streets with these things. These are brandished during road rage incidents. And, there's the old adage, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. There's, I'm sure today there would be, don't bring an airsoft gun to a gunfight, because if these people pull these in anger during a conflict with somebody, and the other person is carrying a live weapon, unless they have good prior knowledge, they're likely to defend themselves because it's a perceived threat. Absolutely.
Trouble. Whether you're a kid or a whatever, you've invited trouble. We had that very thing happen in Cottonwood a year or two ago. It's been a little time. What turned out to be an airsoft gun, and just some young people were flashing that in traffic. Well, it obviously got everybody very, very, upset. Fortunately, nothing happened where any weapons were discharged, but you can just imagine the trouble. And young people, we were there.
Not thinking through.
Are not thinking through these kinds of things.
Exactly. They get a good reminder if they are caught by us and they're pulled out of a car at gunpoint, which has happened.
A good reminder.
It's a very, I guess, educational experience for them, because until we know for sure that it's not a real weapon, we're going to treat it as such. And I'm sure there are several people home thinking, wow, That was a really, really bad idea.
Well, and that's what they need to think. Before the break, let me ask you, how do we leave this? What do you tell parents? I mean, here again, Halloween, sometimes youngsters are out in the streets with weapons as part of their costumes and whatnot. Moms and dads should know what?
Well, any type of weapon they have, if it needs to be with it, needs to be very safe. If it's a sword or something like that, it should be soft tip, something they can't hurt themselves or someone else with. And if they have to have a weapon, it really should be as fake as humanly possible, because the kids, and again, they're going to want to have the realistic looking weapon.
Right.
And especially with these, if it's a younger kid, these fire a projectile. So they're dangerous in and of themselves.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's warnings all over it about injuries. Just they need to be very careful, very cautious about what they do, how they display these, if they display them at all. And they should never, ever, ever be pointed at another individual, especially unless it's in a very, very controlled environment. And then I would still say, you know, shooting a projectile, when law enforcement use these for safety, we have the full, you typically have the full face gear and everything else, and we're trying to mimic a real life shooting scenario and find out where our hits are. Kids don't need to go to that extent. They need to be very aware, put themselves in the other person's shoe. How does this look to somebody else if I have this weapon? And act accordingly.
Good rule of thumb. Brandon Bonney is our guest. Sergeant Brandon Bonney with Prescott Valley Police. We'll take a short break. Countywide's back right after this.
If you're looking for a new pet that your family will cherish every day, consider adopting from a shelter. Shelters are the best places to find a new pet. That's where you'll discover healthy, loyal, and loving animals, eager to become a part of your family. A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet, so bring home your new buddy today. To find out more, visit theshelterpetproject.org.
Hey, honey.
What's up, buddy?
Honey? I think he's been smoking pot.
Call 911. It's okay, Joey. I'm here. Can you hear me, son?
I'm right here.
Are you with
Is he
me?
breathing?
He's not responsive.
Hello?
Honey, give me steak knife and a ballpoint pen.
What are you
now,
doing?
step. I'm gonna do mouth to mouth.
No.
You know lots of ways to help your child, but do you know what to do if they're using drugs? The partnership at drugfree.org can help.
Cook foods to the right temperature using a food thermometer. 3,000 Americans will die from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
Hi, I'm Captain Larry Dawson with the Cottonwood Fire Department, here to talk to you about cooking safety in your home. When cooking with oil, make sure you have the proper size lid and an oven mitt nearby. If the oil does catch fire, cover the pan with the lid while wearing an oven mitt. Turn off the burner. Never throw water or baking soda on a grease fire. Never leave an open flame unattended, and always have a working fire extinguisher nearby.
We welcome you back to the program. It is Countywide, and our guest today is Sergeant Brandon Bonney with Prescott Valley Police, talking today about toy guns. I would ask our viewers, is this real or is it not real? And here again, Brandon, some of the educated with a moment's look might determine this is not a real quote-unquote gun.
Right.
This is a toy or another airsoft, or what is this?
That is a pellet gun.
Okay, it's a pellet gun.
Yeah.
Okay, so it can cause plenty of trouble.
It can, but again,
here
it's
again,
not
it's
a real firearm.
the kind of thing, and we apologize to our radio-only listeners. If you get a chance, VerdeValleyTV.com or Cable 1 Channel 2 to take a look. But I think a lot of people have a good idea, even just hearing the program today, what we're talking about, that so many toy guns or airsoft guns, the quote-unquote guns that aren't real, sure look real, and that can just pose a problem. Here as we head toward holiday time, when sometimes the youngsters are going to want toy weapons under the Christmas tree, and of course Halloween just around the corner this week as we record, be very, very careful about that. Well, let's go back to something we touched on at the beginning of the show, and that is weapons, firearms at or near schools.
Right.
the scenario that I painted for you, the gentleman who says, I'm a gun owner and everything's good, I'm all good to go, in good standing with law enforcement, but I do keep a weapon in my vehicle. My vehicle goes onto school property on a pretty regular basis.
Right.
Is he doing anything wrong?
Well, it depends, because you have to understand, under the misconduct involving weapons, it goes up to about 26 subsections. Just on one of the aspects of the misconduct involving weapons.
Okay.
Now, weapons on school grounds are in theory, really a bad idea unless they're law enforcement.
Right.
Legally, someone can have a firearm on school grounds if a couple of things are met. One, it is locked securely in a vehicle. It must be unloaded. It cannot be loaded, and it must be completely out of sight.
Okay.
Those are several of the provisions, and I believe that's probably for somebody who, maybe again the situation where you said where the person has a weapon in their car,
right,
and it's part of their vehicle. So if those provisions are met, typically there won't be any issue for that person. But I guess people need to ask themselves what the risk is versus the reward. So why would I necessarily have it there if it is unloaded, out of sight, locked in my car?
It's with me for self-protection. I don't have time to unholster.
So there's no way they could use it for that. So, the best idea is if somebody were every day to do that, and I'm not going to tell somebody not to defend themselves from school on their way home, but they would have to weigh the risk and versus the rewards for that. Law enforcement can carry on school grounds, and there's also a subsection for retired police officers to carry on school grounds. And even then, most people would do it in a very limited manner because it is a liability. As a school resource officer, I was just joking the other day with my wife that I didn't walk right because I didn't swing my right arm, because I was so used to walking through crowds of kids and having my arm up against my firearm for safety, because there are some kids who still think it's funny to walk up and reach and grab for a firearm on a law enforcement, and we're trained to react in that situation. So it's really better to give yourself that gray area so you don't have that terrible situation or I guess awkward scenario that presents itself on a fairly routine basis.
That raises a point, and it's something here again that I think we've done a pretty extensive job over the years of hats off to our men and women in blue. But just thinking about that you have to be on guard 100% of the time,
right.
In a way. I mean, you don't have to be jumpy, like that. But just to think of it that way, just walking through a crowd, and even if it's a joke, you're trained to react.
Right.
And the threat has to be dealt with very, very probably quickly and expeditiously. So again, we just say hats off. You touched on my next question. Here again, I want to point to an incident that we had one of our schools in Yavapai County where a youngster was a hunter and had hunted with his family over the weekend, had a deer rifle. I don't know if it was in like the back window or whatnot, but it was not covered up and all of those kinds of things.
Right.
You're saying this is state law. This isn't school policy.
Right.
State laws are going to dictate.
State law dictates the criminal nature of it. And the schools can have policies, and most do. Most do not want a firearm on their school grounds. And again, there are other provisions within there, if there's a lawful hunting type activity at the school or an NRA type class at the school.
Sure.
So again, there are certain provisions, and the one part of that is, I think, mostly guided towards handguns, but again, there's so many different provisions. The one I talked about with the retired law enforcement, that's provision W, and it starts at A, and there were some after that. So there are so many, but the schools typically take a zero tolerance. They're very, very strict about it because that kid may not intend harm to individuals, but if somebody sees that and they want to seize that opportunity to grab that weapon and then inflict harm on people, that's also what they're trying to minimize and eliminate by disallowing any type of weapons or even faux weapons on school grounds.
Yeah, you introduce a gun into a situation, it goes from 0, 1, or 2 to 50, just like, instantly. It just changes the entire nature of whatever the situation is.
Absolutely. And again, what do you gain? I mean, what do you gain? What you might see is a kid coming and saying, look how cool this, look how realistic this looks. I shot it when we were out hunting this weekend. Right. Again, but they have the zero tolerance because it's hard to distinguish between that child and the one who has one. I had a young man who I caught with a 4-inch locking blade Spyderco type knife in his shoe, and he told me he forgot it was there. Okay, it's an enormous knife under his foot that he's walking on. He knows it, but if somebody else says, "Well, I forgot it hunting," now You know, you need to be equitable in the way they enforce the rules with some gray areas. So that's why they have that tougher stance.
And as as a school resource officer, who's probably going to be the point man or woman on this kind of situation, do you have enough sway to make that kind of a call? The kid with the hunting rifle that was still in his truck had just simply forgotten to take it out. I mean, that's all it turned out to be. But someone else saw it. Someone else, I guess, could have gotten in there and gotten it and done who knows what with it.
Right.
So it was obviously a very dangerous situation, but it was accidental. Do you have, as a law enforcement officer,
we do have
to hear the whole story and then?
We have discretion on how we enforce the laws, and sometimes it's very black and white. But there are times when you look at the spirit versus the letter of the law, and whether or not you have to also measure intent. Did this person intend? If we bring them in and tell them, hey, this was seen in your car in your back seat, and they have a legitimate look like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I forgot that, then we have some leeway. Now, oftentimes the schools, and rightfully so, might have a much stronger stance and end up with some significant discipline involved.
An expulsion, even if there's no
absolutely, and I wouldn't
charge.
necessarily blame them. Again, they have to protect the kids.
Right.
But we do have some discretion. We have to look at the intent. And does it actually violate state law? We'd have to look through and find if there's other provisions, talk to that individual, find out why they had it. Really the totality of the circumstances have to be weighed before we make a decision on whether or not somebody's going to be arrested or charged with a criminal offense.
We've got to run to our second break, Brandon. Time flying by quickly. Sergeant Brandon Bonney, Prescott Valley PD. We'll take a short break. Countywide's back after this.
Now, some action from the courts. Billie Jean King renewing her rivalry with arthritis. First set, furious volley, and right to the net for a winner. Beautiful forehand there. Arthritis, stunned. And here, match point. Billie Jean with the ace, taking it in straight sets. Afterwards, a jubilant Billie Jean King.
Tennis is a weapon for me with arthritis. There's nothing like it for me to hit a ball, run to the ball, anytime, any court. I'm ready. Let's go.
What's your weapon against arthritis? Find out at fightarthritispain.org.
Packers. Viking. Packers. Viking. Packers. Viking.
Red state. Blue state. Vegan.
Carnivore.
We come from different places.
Uptown.
Downtown.
Optimist.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full.
But when we live united, we create real, lasting change in the building blocks of life. The education, income, and health of our communities, our families,
united.
Even the person next to us.
Live united.
Real change won't happen without you. So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up at liveunited.org.
Hungry? Yeah. The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
Hi, I'm Captain Larry Dawson with the Cottonwood Fire Department, here to talk to you about cooking safety in your home. The #1 cause of house fires today is lack of safety in the kitchen. Always set a timer while you're cooking. If a fire starts in your oven, close the door and turn the oven off. When kids are present while cooking, always use the back burners and keep handles turned in and out of reach of children. Never leave an open flame unattended, and always have a working fire extinguisher nearby.
Welcome back to the program. It is Countywide. Brad Miller with you, and again, our guest today, Sergeant Brandon Bonney, Prescott Valley Police. We appreciate your time. We're fresh out of it for today. But I guess just final words, again, as we tape our show today, Halloween just a few days away. Christmas is coming. Kids, boys, little boys love especially to get toy guns. What do folks need to know? Mom and Dad, your
exercise as much common sense as they can.
Yeah.
Understand they look real. Control the environments of the kids. If they have these, they play with them. Don't perceive that other people aren't going to think that an 11 or 12-year-old kid isn't a threat.
Right.
Look at it from other people's shoes. How are they perceiving this weapon? Don't allow your children to put themselves in harm's way by displaying these things in a dangerous manner that might bring harm to themselves. And just look at anything and everything with the costumes with the kids. Safety is #1. You might be the bad guy for a short time, but make sure it's a safe costume they can see well in, other people can see them. It's about having fun. It's not about having regret because of a poor decision or youthful indiscretion that might have led to something significant.
Common sense will carry the day, Brandon. Again, we thank you. Salute you for what you do. Sergeant Brandon Bonney, Prescott Valley Police. It's countywide. We'll see you next time.
This has been Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Listen in each Tuesday and Thursday as we tackle the hot topics and talk to the decision makers across Yavapai County. That's Countywide with Brad Miller and Paul David each Tuesday and Thursday on this Yavapai Broadcasting station.